Here we have Ask a Reasonable Question. Exciting.
Ask a reasonable question.
Okay, so I've kind of picked two questions this week. This could be an example where the questions are going to be far more interesting than the answers. So from Rob, he said, if you could be a roadie from history, what tour would you pick and why? And then a question from John. This is a good question. If you were to receive a golden ticket that would enable you to travel into the past and see one concert by one band/musical artist, who would you pick and why? But he specifies some rules. He says, Rule 1, you have to come back to the present after the show. Rule 2, you don't have to worry. You won't muck up anything in the present or the future. Rule 3, it cannot be a show that I've already seen and want to re-experience. And Rule 4, it can, however, be a very specific show at a very specific time and a very specific place, if I have one in mind. Thanks for that, John. They're very specific rules. I will give you my answer. I think if I had to go to any concert, go back in time without upsetting the space-time continuum, I would go back to the filming of The Last Waltz, which happened in New York. I'm not quite sure what year that was. Probably like the late 70s, probably, wasn't it? But for anyone who's seen The Last Waltz, and if you're a music fan, you'll have seen it. It was the band, Bob Dylan, Dr. John, Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, Ringo Starr, Muddy Waters, Ronnie Wood, Neil Young, Clapton. It was, you know, for a music fan, or for a music fan of that era of music, it's just kind of the pinnacle. Van Morrison in his purple jumpsuit, you know, with all his high kicks when he's doing Caravan, I think it is. It's just hard to top that. Clapton and Robertson having their guitar off. It's amazing. And I think, John, that I would probably be fine if I went back in time there, because Scorsese never filmed the audience. He made a deliberate decision to not film the audience because he wanted to get the viewers like right on the stage as much as possible. So I probably would be fine. And Rob, if I had to be a roadie, it would probably be a roadie on that show. Because, I mean, you get to be the roadie to all those artists in one go. So that's my answer to those two questions.
A reasonable question.
Now it's time for Ask a Reasonable Question. And this week's question, there's two questions, in fact. And the first question is an excellent and profoundly reasonable question. And it comes from Tom. Cillian, what's your favorite flavor of crisps? Tom, salt and vinegar. Always salt and vinegar. Tato salt and vinegar, preferably. They are an Irish brand of crisps, and they are so vinegary. You know, sometimes you get the freak packet where they've got the seasoning wrong, and it's so vinegary, you know, it turns your lips blue. I like it that vinegary. And then the second question is from Michael. Want anything from the shop? Packet of salt and vinegar Tato, please, Michael. Oh, it's time for the very last Ask a Reasonable Question. This is the last time your ears will have to endure this ident.
Ask a reasonable question.
Okay, the first question is from Cleo. The question is, movies or music, which could you not live without? Oh, it's a very easy answer for me on this one. Music was definitely my first love. And as I've said many times, I am a failed or frustrated musician. So, I mean, without music, there'd be silence, and I couldn't deal with that. Movies, seen enough of them, you know, I'll keep them in my head. No, definitely music. And I'll do one more. This is from Paula. What were you listening to when you were 13 or 14? Apparently, this is when our musical tastes are formed. Oh, well, at that age, I was still obsessed with the Beatles. What else was I listening to? Stone Roses. I was obsessed with the Frank and Walters, who were a Cork band. I used to kind of follow them around in Cork. I remember Achtung Baby came out when I was 14. And I remember hearing The Fly. I remember being in my mother's Fiat 127, and she was gone into the shops or something, and that came on the radio, The Fly. And it was huge, because it was so different and so dangerous and so processed and so grown up. And has that epic edge guitar solo on it. And, you know, U2 were superstars in Ireland. And I was into a lot of Irish music. I was into Hot House Flowers. They were a big band for me at the time. I started discovering the Pogues at that time. Sinead O'Connor. We're going to hear some Sinead O'Connor a little later on the show. So I guess it was a lot of Irish music I was listening to. There was a lot of amazing Irish acts around all that time ago. So a big thank you to everyone who sent in reasonable questions over the last few weeks. And also to you who sent in marginally unreasonable questions. Let's call them reasonable, unreasonable questions, a la Donald Rumsfeld. That was the Reverend Al Green. That was Love Ritual. That was a Buana mix. That was from the album Love Ritual, which was released in 1989. So that was all rare and unreleased tracks of Al Green's. An amazing track. I once saw Al Green in Cork. This was way back in 2005. And I remember the bass at that gig was unbelievable. It was that sort of teeth rattling, you know, rib shaking bass. And I remember I was with my wife at the time and she was pregnant with our first son. I remember looking over at her and saying, "Do you think the baby's going to be okay with all the bass?" And she said, "Yes, the baby will be fine." The baby was fine and he's now 16. And I can't say that he likes Al Green, but he likes music.